They thought my hands were too old to count, too shaky to trust, too fragile to touch what I'd spent a lifetime building. I remember the way they said it, calm, smiling, as if they were taking care of me. "You don't need to worry about money, Mom. Leave that to us." That phrase sounded like love disguised as care. But behind it I heard something else. The sound of a door closing. It all began on a Sunday morning, one of those mornings that smell of coffee and fresh oranges. My children were gathered around the table, laughing, talking, full of plans. I looked at them and felt proud. I believed we were doing well, that this was the result of an honest life, of so much effort. But sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive like a storm. It enters like a gentle breeze, disguised, until it becomes the air you breathe without you even realizing it. The first sign came in a glance. A quick, averted gaze when I asked about a bank statement. A hesitation that was too long. Then came the whispered conversations, the disappearing papers, the signatures that looked like mine but weren't. Even so, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Because the hardest truth to accept is the one that bears the face of one's own blood. I built that family with the same discipline I built my career with. Every coin I saved was laden with sacrifice, sleepless nights, and promises I kept even when no one believed in me. And suddenly, those same coins were being counted by hands that trembled not with age, but with greed. They said I was too old to handle money. What they meant was, "You're too old to realize what we're taking away." It's strange how silence becomes a weapon when no one expects you to use it. I started listening, the pauses, the apologies, the tone of pity when they spoke to me. Every "don't worry" sounded like "don't interfere." Every "we'll take care of everything" was, in reality, "be quiet." I didn't argue, smiled. He nodded. Because sometimes the smartest thing a woman can do is let herself be underestimated. They forgot what time does to a woman like me. Time doesn't weaken, it refines. It teaches you to read faces better than books, to wait without losing focus, to prepare without declaring war. I realized I didn't need to confront them yet. I just needed to observe. And as he watched, the truth began to reveal itself, like a piece of paper left too close to a fire, the edges burning slowly, the ink appearing word by word. I thought about all the times I taught my children about honesty, about pride, about never taking what doesn't belong to them. And there I was, the lesson they chose to forget. Money isn't just paper and numbers. It's memory. It's proof. It's the map of every sleepless night and every morning that began before sunrise. They thought they were stealing my wealth. But what they took was much deeper. They thought age made me harmless. But age doesn't erase what we've learned. It sharpens it. A dull knife is dangerous when you stop watching it. And I hadn't pretended to be blind for a long time. The day I found out what they had done, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there in the middle of my silent kitchen, surrounded by everything I've built, and asked myself a question. If they think I'm too old to handle money, what will they do when they find out I still know how to handle power? In the following days, I began to realize how much betrayal can hide in small gestures. The sweet voices on the phone, the smiles that didn't reach their eyes, the way they spoke of me in the third person even when I was in the room. "She's confused," they'd say. "Age is taking its toll." Each word felt like a brick being piled between me and reality. And the more they treated me as fragile, the more strength I felt growing inside. The blow didn't come all at once. It was built in silence, with the delicacy of someone cutting a flower by the stem and hoping the perfume will mask the damage. The documents began to change places. The family lawyer, a man who once shook my hand respectfully, now avoided looking me in the eye. The bills started arriving under a different name. My money, the fruit of years of work, was vanishing in invisible transfers, all for my own good. One night, I sat in the living room armchair with a folder of papers on my lap. The distant sound of the television came from the kitchen, where my son was laughing loudly with his wife. I looked at the numbers, the dates, the signatures, and realized that every detail told a story of calculated carelessness. I didn't cry. There weren't enough tears to explain the kind of pain that doesn't come from loss, but from the certainty of having been deceived by the very person you held in your lap. The house felt cold, even with the lights on. Each portrait on the walls carried a gaze that now consumed me from within. I saw the faces of my grandchildren, and a cruel thought pierced my mind. Will they also learn to steal with the same smile they inherited? It was there that an old memory came to mind. My grandmother in her white apron, counting the savings kept in biscuit tins. She used to say that money only has value when it comes with respect, and that whoever loses respect for themselves ends up poor, even with full pockets. Those words resonated within me like a call. From that day on, I began to see everything with different eyes. The silences, the contradictions, the glances exchanged at dinner. They didn't realize it, but I was learning again how to play the game they thought I had already forgotten. And the more they treated me as incapable, the more I perfected my calmness. Silence, I discovered, is the most powerful disguise of a wounded woman who hasn't yet given up. The days blended together, and routine became a stage. I watched the scenes unfold and mentally noted every detail. The messages exchanged in secret, the names whispered, the family gatherings to which I was no longer invited. At first, I thought I just wanted to reclaim what was mine. But then I understood. What I really wanted was for them to understand the weight of underestimating someone who gave them everything. While waiting for the right moment, I rediscovered something within myself that had long been dormant, the pleasure of not being predictable. There was a quiet freedom in watching them build their own castle of lies without realizing that I already had the map of the cracks. And the more I remained silent, the more the truth took shape. It was as if each unspoken word gave me time, space, and power. I knew that justice, when done at the right time, has a flavor that not even the most stolen money can buy. Many who are listening to me now understand what it's like to be abandoned by those who should be protecting you. That's why so many people choose to stay here, following each revelation, because they know that the silence of a woman like me is never empty. It's merely the interval between the blow and the response. And I was ready to respond, but not with words, with something that would make them all understand that time, the same time they used to erase me, would be my greatest ally. Because the clock always starts ticking again, and this time it would tick to the rhythm of my revenge. One afternoon, I went into my home office, the place that used to be my refuge. The window still let in the same yellowish light of the end of the day, but the atmosphere seemed different. On the desk, I found a stack of folders and an envelope I didn't recognize. The paper had my name written on it in my eldest son's shaky handwriting. I opened it slowly, already feeling my stomach clench. Inside, a transfer document, my name replaced with his. The signature, too perfect to be mine. I stood there, staring at the paper as if it were a photograph of the exact moment love dies. The house seemed quieter than ever. Only the ticking of the clock and the distant sound of a dripping tap broke the heavy air. The smell of reheated coffee and the coldness of the ceramic tiles under my feet completed the scene of a bloodless crime, but with all the marks. In that moment, I realized the theft wasn't just of money, but of my story. They wanted to erase the woman who built every wall of that house, who traded rest for sustenance, and who now, in their eyes, was nothing more than a nuisance with wrinkles and too many memories. The cruelest thing was that all of this was disguised as love. A love that sent messages reminding me to take my medication, while stealing what was mine. I spent days pretending not to know. I observed how they treated me with more patience than affection, more pity than respect. Each "Are you all right, ma'am?" sounded like an attempt to gauge me, to see if I was still capable of understanding what they were doing. But what they didn't imagine was that I had always been good at waiting. And time, the very time they tried to use against me, would become my best witness. At night, I would lock myself in my room and review everything. I kept copies, printed receipts, recorded dates. The sound of the printer was almost a whispered confession. Those papers were my new weapon, each sheet a reminder that I was still in control of my sanity, and that, when I decided to act, nothing would remain the same. One day during dinner, I heard my daughter-in-law say, with a smile too sweet to be innocent, "Mom should enjoy life, travel, forget these worries. Leave the rest to us." The rest. That word pierced me like a cold blade. They were already talking about me in the past tense, even with my body sitting at the table. That night was the turning point. I didn't cry, I didn't argue. But inside me, a decision began to take shape, as clear as the flickering candle flame above the dinner table. I looked at each of them, and realized that their power over me ended exactly where my silence began. Little by little, I began to plant doubts where there had once been trust. A stray comment here, a casual question there. And like rats, they began to contradict each other. I discovered that fear corrodes faster than any plan. All it took was a firm look from me for one of them to stutter in his response. What I've learned throughout life is that those who lie always fear being caught, and those who fear give everything away. For days, I lived with the calm of someone about to light a fuse. With each of their moves, I mentally noted what I would need to dismantle the charade. It was like putting together a puzzle in reverse. I already knew the final image, I just needed the right pieces. Sometimes, when the sun rose, I would look at my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the woman I once was. There was something new in my eyes. Not hatred, but clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when love stops blinding and begins to illuminate what has always been there. And while they slept peacefully, believing I had given up, I already knew exactly how to wake them. Because revenge, when it comes from a mature and silent woman, makes no noise. It simply happens like the sunrise. But what I discovered next changed everything. Because the money, I realized, wasn't what was really at stake. What they were trying to steal was something far more valuable. Something they didn't even know I still had. And when I realized that, the plan changed completely. That night, the silence of the house had a different sound. It was the sound of waiting. The sound that precedes the truth as it prepares to emerge from the darkness. The moon shone through the curtain and traced a silvery path on the floor, as if inviting me to follow it. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about everything I had discovered, about what I was about to do. And I felt something I didn't expect. Calm. Not the calm that comes from peace, but the calm that comes from certainty. Until then, I believed that what drove me was anger. But I realized that what sustained me was something greater. Dignity. It was dignity that made me take a deep breath before acting, that prevented me from stooping to the same level as those who hurt me. Dignity is a silent armor, heavy but beautiful to wear. And it was with it that I began to write the new chapter of my story. I spent days watching the sunrise through the same window, preparing the plan with the care of someone hand sewing a delicate fabric. Every stitch had to be precise, every detail invisible. I didn't want impulsive revenge. I wanted justice with precision. And it's curious how, when you stop reacting and start acting, fear changes address. It moves to the other side. While they continued with the lies, I prepared the scene. I reconnected with old contacts, reviewed documents, organized evidence. And in the midst of this process, something inside me began to blossom again. A feeling I hadn't felt in years. Pride in myself. I, who had once been treated as a burden, was now the thread that wove the destiny of everyone around me. One Friday afternoon, I sat at the table with a cup of tea. The sound of the clock was the only thing filling the space. I picked up the necklace I'd inherited from my mother and held it between my fingers. It always reminded me of who I was before they tried to erase me. A woman who learned to conquer everything in silence. Her strength flowed through me. And I understood that the true legacy is not what you leave behind, but what you learn to preserve. My son entered the room. He had the same practiced smile, the same rehearsed tone of voice. He asked if I needed anything, as if offering help to disguise his fear. I simply replied that I was fine. He didn't realize that, in saying that, I was returning the mirror to him, the reflection of someone who underestimated a mother's love and found a woman ready to do whatever it takes. There was a moment when I almost felt pity. But pity is a luxury only those who have never been betrayed can feel. I had ceased to be the woman who waited for understanding. Now I was the one who observed, planned, and waited for the moment when the house of cards would collapse. And it would crumble. Between one memory and another, I found myself smiling. Not an ironic smile, but one of recognition. I realized that growing older hasn't made me vulnerable. It's made me selective. Today, I choose where I place my emotions, and each one has a purpose. Perhaps that's why so many, upon hearing stories like mine, feel the urge to support this journey, leaving a silent sign that the message touched them. Because deep down, we all know what it's like to be discarded by those who should care. That night, as the city lights flickered outside, I thought about how generous time can be when we learn to use it as an ally. It doesn't heal, but it reveals. And when it reveals, it shows who truly deserves to be by our side. The sound of the wind entering through the window brought a premonition. Something was about to happen. I didn't yet know what it would be, but I felt that, after that night, nothing would ever be the same again. Because fate has a curious way of settling debts. Sometimes it just waits for the right person to be ready to collect. The next morning, the sky was heavy, as if sensing what was to come. I opened the curtains and let the light flood the room, the kind of brightness that doesn't illuminate, but reveals. The floor gleamed, the walls seemed colder, and the silence had a hint of waiting. In the center of the table, my mother's necklace rested on the papers I had organized during the early hours. It was strange to think that my revenge was beginning there, so peaceful, so clean, almost domestic. With every step I took through the house, I felt the past watching me. I remembered the days when this same table held birthdays, laughter, dreams. Now it held evidence, receipts, copies, printed conversations, every detail of a plan they thought I wouldn't have the courage to execute. They were wrong. When they took away my trust, they left the perfect space for the strategy to be born. I could still hear their voices in my head. The same words that once sounded like care now had the bitter taste of manipulation. "You're tired, Mom. Let us take care of the finances." It was a lie. They never wanted to take care of me. They wanted to control what I represented. Independence. And independence, for those who live on appearances, is a threat. I ran my fingers over the papers and felt the cold texture of what was about to be the beginning of the end. I had learned that the power of a mature woman lies precisely in not rushing. When everyone expects surrender, it is silence that transforms into movement. That day I went for a walk for the first time in months. The wind was biting, but it did me good. The city continued at its own pace, indifferent to my discontent. And it was in this indifference that I found clarity. People hurried past, and I realized that no one notices the invisible woman, the silent lady who carries in her purse not only her cell phone and wallet, but also a carefully laid plan. I became invisible to them. And invisibility, when used well, is power. As I walked, I thought about everything time has taught me. Youth takes revenge by shouting. I would take revenge by planning. Youth wants to be heard. I wanted to be remembered. Not out of pity, but out of presence. Out of strength. Out of justice. Back home, the clock was almost at noon. The doorbell rang, and for a second, the sound seemed to come from very far away. I opened the door and found the bank messenger. An envelope in his hands, my name spelled out perfectly. My heart raced, not from fear but from confirmation. Inside the envelope was the statement I had discreetly requested weeks before. There was the complete map of what they had done. Transfers, fake investments, withdrawals disguised as family donations. Everything was there. I sat down slowly, the envelope in my hands. I felt my breath quicken, time slow down. The paper trembled slightly between my fingers, but not from weakness, from anticipation. It was like holding back the beginning of a storm. And for the first time I realized that my story was no longer about loss but about power. In the afternoon I called an old contact, a lawyer who owed me a favor from years ago. We spoke briefly. He quickly understood what was at stake. I arranged a meeting, but I didn't tell my family anything. I let them think I was still distracted, that I continued to believe every sweet word they served me at dinner. While they laughed in the room, I watched them with the same gaze a hunter reserves for his prey. And what surprised me wasn't the hatred, it was the serenity. There was a part of me that still lamented what was lost, but another, much stronger part knew Some loves need to die so that respect can live again. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch, smelling the approaching rain. The clouds covered the sky, slow, heavy, laden with promise. I knew that, like the rain, the truth cannot be contained forever. Arrives, soaks, cleanses. And as the wind rustled the curtains, I closed my eyes and thought about the next day. The day they would discover that the woman too old to handle money still knew very well how to deal with justice. But there was something even I hadn't imagined, and what was about to happen would prove that the truth, when it returns, never comes alone. The next day dawned with the soft sound of rain pattering against the windows. Each drop seemed to mark the rhythm of my breath. I dressed slowly, like someone preparing for something the body already understands, but the mind still resists accepting. The mirror reflected back an image I barely recognized. Not because of aging, but because of lucidity. There was a new firmness in my gaze, a kind of serenity that only comes after pain. It was the gaze of someone who stopped asking for love and learned to demand respect. The meeting with the lawyer was brief, but enough to change the course of things. He read the papers, looked up and said without mincing words, "They committed fraud." The word hung in the air, heavy, concrete, cutting through any remaining denial that still existed within me. Fraud. My own children. The confirmation of what I already knew, but which now had form, stamp, and signature. Back home the city seemed slower. People hurried past, umbrellas bumped against the sidewalks, and I walked at a different pace, the pace of decision. Each step reminded me that, even when they try to erase us, the ground still recognizes the strength of those who built it. When I opened the living room door, I smelled the familiar aroma of freshly cooked food. Dinner was ready, and they were waiting for me, smiling as if nothing had happened. The table was set, the aroma of the rice, the sound of the cutlery. Everything was the same, but nothing was the same. I sat in my usual place and watched. My son's hand touched his wife's under the table, an automatic, rehearsed, almost theatrical gesture. I knew that this charade would end soon. But it wasn't time. Not yet. While they talked about travel plans, I thought about another journey, the one that had brought me there, from the moment they called me old. I remembered the early mornings I spent sewing to pay for their studies, the times I kept quiet to avoid conflict, the promises I made to myself and never kept. Each memory was a small wound reopened, but this time without pain. It was as if I needed to see the old blood dry to understand the new that was to come. In the middle of dinner, the youngest one commented that I seemed distant. I smiled and said, "I'm just observing." He laughed, thinking it was a joke. But that sentence was the purest truth. I was observing every gesture, every word, every crumb of guilt hidden behind the smiles. After everyone had gone to sleep, I walked through the dark house. The sound of footsteps echoed off the walls, and I felt the weight of years ingrained in every corner. The photos in the frames seemed to follow me with their gaze. There was love there, I knew, but there was also deceit, selfishness, fear. And perhaps that's what made everything more human, the mixture of what saves and what destroys. In the living room, I sat in the armchair and turned on the lamp. The yellow light cast long shadows on the carpet, and it was in those shadows that I realized what time had taught me. Love without respect is merely a polite kind of prison. I stood there in silence for long minutes. The clock marked each second with the precision of a memory. I thought about giving up for a moment. Not because of the material loss, but because of the exhaustion. It was tiring to carry so much. The betrayal, the loneliness, the role of someone who needs to be strong even when their heart begs for a truce. But I soon understood that strength wasn't a choice. It was an inheritance. And true inheritances are neither given nor stolen. They are simply lived. Outside, the wind picked up. The rain intensified and began to beat harder against the window pane. Seemed like a warning, or perhaps a call. Something inside me stirred, as if an ancient voice were whispering, "The time is coming." I got up and walked to the window. The street was empty, covered in reflections of flickering lights. The storm reflected what I felt inside. A serene, beautiful, and frightening chaos. the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. And it was in that instant, watching the sky open up in distant lightning, that I understood. True justice doesn't happen when the other person is punished. It happens when you regain your own strength without needing anyone to acknowledge it. But there was still something waiting for me. Something I hadn't seen in the papers. Something that had escaped my control. And when I realized this, my heart raced. Because sometimes, the truth that sets you free is the same one that also destroys you. And I was about to discover which one awaited me. The next day I woke before sunrise. The house was still asleep, and the silence seemed greater than ever. I walked to the kitchen and prepared my coffee with the same care as always. But everything around me had a different meaning. Every movement, every detail was part of something bigger. A plan that no longer belonged only to me, but to the justice I had decided to awaken. The water boiled slowly, and the steam rose as a sign that the time was right. I sat at the table and looked at the open notebook before me. In it, I wrote down the next steps, not as revenge, but as a strategy. Each line was a choice, each word a thread of control regained. I didn't want to punish them with hatred. I wanted to teach them with consequences. The kind of consequence that can't be erased with apologies. My lawyer had advised me. The evidence was solid, the documents irrefutable. But he also warned me, when power changes hands, fear changes faces. I knew that as soon as everything came to light, the masks would fall. And however much my heart urged me to hurry, I learned that haste is the enemy of accuracy. So I waited. That afternoon, the house filled with voices again. My children arrived for lunch, bringing the same tone of staged familiarity. The smell of sautéed garlic, the clatter of plates, the rehearsed laughter. Everything seemed normal, almost convincing. But there was something new in the air. I was no longer trying to believe anything. I simply observed, like someone watching a play for the second time, knowing the ending. While they ate, I studied every expression, every glance. Guilt is a mediocre actress. It always gives up the role too soon. And there, at the table where I once served love, now it was I who served silence. A heavy, calculated, sharp silence. After lunch, when everyone went upstairs, I was left alone with the dirty cups. The white foam of the detergent covered the water, and for a moment I saw myself reflected there. Half submerged, half visible. I thought about how many times I had lived like that, hiding so that others could shine. But that reflection was changing. I was no longer the woman who accepted crumbs of respect. I was the woman who had learned to transform invisibility into power. The following days passed like a taut silk thread. The lawyer made the notifications, discreet and firm. And little by little, the first signs began. Missed calls, nervous glances, conversations interrupted when I entered the room. They sensed it. And they sensed it early. The house, once full of noise, was taken over by an uncomfortable silence. The kind of silence that precedes collapse. But the most curious thing is that I didn't feel pleasure. Felt clarity. Their pain didn't make me happy. It only restored my balance. It was as if, by returning the weight of the choices they made, I could finally walk lightly. One night, I met my daughter-in-law in the hallway. She avoided my eyes, but her trembling voice broke the air. "You knew all along, didn't you?" I answered with just a look. Because sometimes, a look says more than any sentence. She looked away, and in that look I saw the beginning of the fall. The following week, the first calls came. The bank blocking accounts, the lawyer requesting a meeting. My oldest son tried to hide it, but his anger betrayed him. He came into the kitchen, his eyes red, and asked what I had done. "Nothing you haven't already started," I replied. He yelled, but his voice didn't reach me. I just kept washing the dishes, with the calm of someone who understands that power, when it returns, doesn't need to be displayed. It just needs to be felt. From that point on, everything began to fall into place. The same people who had called me old now looked at me with fear and, in a way, with respect. It was as if they finally saw the woman who had always been there, beneath the wrinkles, behind the patience. And perhaps this is the moment when those who follow this story understand something bigger. When they underestimate a silent woman, they are only digging their own grave. As I walked to the porch that night, I noticed something curious. The moon was full, enormous, illuminating even the most stubborn shadows in the yard. And it was impossible not to think that time is wise. It doesn't erase what is unjust, it only waits for the exact moment to reveal it. I stood there, watching the sky and breathing the cold air, feeling the weight lift little by little. I knew the consequences were still to come, that their downfall would be public, inevitable. But for now, this silence was enough. A clean silence of discreet victory, where each person who hears this story might feel the urge to leave their own mark, a thought, a memory, something that says, I understand what it is to be underestimated and to survive with grace. The wind picked up and the curtains danced gently, as if the whole world were watching. And I, in silence, remained there, no longer waiting for justice, but observing the soft sound of those who have finally learned to win without needing to shout. In the days that followed, the house gradually lost the sounds of routine. The forced laughter at lunch, the scraping of chairs, even the slamming of doors. Everything became subdued, almost timid. It was as if the air had learned to walk on tiptoe. They avoided crossing paths with me. And when they did, there was something new in their eyes. The fear of being seen. Not by me but by themselves. The silence, once imposed upon me, now belonged to them. I heard it in their trembling voices, their hesitant steps, their attempts to hide the inevitable. The bank had called them. The lawyer insisted. And the truth, the one that had waited years in the dark, finally walked with its head held high through the corridors. I didn't need to do anything but observe. It was like seeing the reflection of a storm I didn't need to provoke, only mirror. One morning, I found my eldest son in the living room. His eyes sunken and his face dejected. He was holding one of the papers the lawyer had sent. He looked at me and said in a hoarse voice, "You destroyed your own family." I just smiled, because deep down he still didn't understand that I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply let the truth do its usual work. The destruction wasn't mine. It was the work of the silence they forced me to swallow for years. The same silence that now weighed upon them. As he spoke, I realized there was no regret in his tone, only anger. Anger at having been caught, anger at having lost control. And that made me understand something I had never realized before. Some people don't ask for forgiveness because they are sorry, but because they have been found out. And that difference is what separates those who change from those who only pretend. The day dragged on slowly, and in the afternoon the rain returned. I sat by the window and watched the drops trickling down the glass. Each trail of water reflected a part of what I felt, freedom and loneliness intertwined. Because, although justice had been served, nothing erases the emptiness left by disappointment. It's strange how the truth, even when it saves us, also wounds us. Sometimes I wondered if it was worth it. If revealing everything was worth the price of seeing my own children as strangers. But then I remembered my mother's words. Respect, once lost, is the thing that takes the longest to regain. And that's why I chose the harder path, that of staying standing even when everyone expected me to fall. That night, I made tea and sat in the darkness of the room. Shadows were projected on the walls like old memories. There was a strange peace there, made of weariness and victory. The sound of the rain mingled with the ticking of the clock, and each second reminded me that time, when it is fair, neither hurries nor delays. It simply observes, as I have learned to do. The youngest came down the stairs. He sat beside me without saying anything. We stayed like that for minutes until he murmured, "Are you still my mother?" It was a simple question but full of abysses. I looked at him and replied, "I am. But now I'm the woman you tried to erase, and who survived." He didn't answer. He just lowered his head. The sound of rain drowned out the silence that followed. In the following days, the news began to spread. People were talking, gossip was spreading across walls. The truth was spreading like wildfire. Society, which had previously looked at me with pity, now looked at me with amazement, and, in a way, with respect. Not the forced, polite respect of someone who feigns kindness, but the silent respect born of recognition. The kind of respect that comes when someone realizes you faced the fire and emerged from it without burning inside. Still, something troubled me. In the midst of all this reconstruction, a doubt whispered in the quietest hours. To what extent is justice worth when it is achieved at the cost of love? Had no answer. Perhaps because love and justice never walk hand in hand. One demands surrender, the other demands distance. And however much I had achieved balance, there was still a void between the two. That night, the wind returned, battering the windows with force. The curtain moved as if the past were still trying to enter. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The sound of the storm was now familiar, almost comforting. I knew it would pass like all the others. But deep down, something told me that what was to come would be different. It wasn't about money anymore, nor about power. It was about what would remain when the last secret came to light. And I felt, with the precision of someone who has learned to listen to silence, that there was still one last secret waiting to be discovered. In the days that followed the storm, the house seemed to breathe new air. Lighter but also colder. Every corner held echoes of what had happened, as if the walls were still trying to understand the change. The portraits in the frames looked different. The same frozen smile from other times now carried a silent irony. It was strange to realize that love, when wounded, remains there, but changes form. It doesn't disappear. You simply become an observer. My youngest son began to avoid the gaze of others. The oldest, out of pride, tried to act as if nothing had happened, but I could see the stiffness in his shoulders, the weariness in his face. People can hide what they've done, but the body doesn't lie. Every gesture of his was a confession. Sometimes I would see him from afar, sitting in the yard, staring into nothingness, and I wondered if he finally understood what it means to lose a mother's trust. It's a loss that cannot be recovered. It's like trying to glue a mirror back together with bare hands. The reflection returns, but always cracked. The neighborhood was buzzing. The stories multiplied like the wind on a dry day. And curiously, no one seemed surprised. They said money changes people. I never believed that. Money doesn't change anyone. It just reveals what's always been hidden. And what my children showed me was something that might have always been there, dormant, waiting for an opportunity to awaken. One afternoon, I went to the garden I had planted myself. The earth, still damp from the rain, exuded a scent of life. I touched the leaves of one of the old rose bushes and realized that, even after everything, it continued to bloom. Beauty endured. I thought about how nature has this simple wisdom. It loses, decays, and is reborn. And perhaps that was what I was learning now. To be reborn within my own abandonment. But there was something that still bothered me. Small, forgotten detail. The lawyer had mentioned a recent movement. Something that wasn't in the initial evidence. A different name and address out of town. A transaction made shortly before everything came to light. It was like a loose thread in a fabric that seemed too complete. And I learned never to ignore loose threads. They always lead to a secret. For days, I tried to push the thought away. I told myself that enough was enough, that what was done was done. But the silence of the house, now so full of emptiness, pushed me back to that doubt. At night, I would get up and walk to the office, turn on the lamp and open the papers again. The sound of the clock seemed louder there. The shadows moved on the walls, and I felt the same old chill, the one that precedes discovery. That's when I noticed a coincidence that wasn't a coincidence. A name repeated in different documents. A surname I knew but didn't expect to see there. My eldest son's wife. The sweet face, the rehearsed words, the always gentle voice. She was involved too. And not just as an accomplice. She was the origin. The mind behind the manipulation. For a few seconds, the ground seemed to spin. It wasn't anger I felt, but a deep, almost ancestral sadness. A woman hurt by another woman, that's a different kind of pain. More silent, more bitter. Because deep down I had believed her. Perhaps even more than I believed in my own children. The memory of each of her gestures returned to my mind with cruel clarity. The exaggerated care, the compliments, The hugs that lasted half a second longer than they should have. It was a perfect performance. And I, distracted by the pain of old age, bought a ticket in the stalls. I sat back down in the armchair, the document in my hands. The paper trembled slightly between my fingers, not from fragility, but from shock. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking the trees. It was as if the whole world was breathing with me, in tense rhythm. I looked around and realized I was about to cross a point of no return. The plan that seemed to be concluded was, in fact, only beginning another phase. I didn't yet know what I would do, but I knew that the next step wouldn't be driven by pain, but by clarity. Because there's a kind of power that you only find when you lose everything. And mine was returning, sharper than ever. The lamp flickered, and the room plunged into twilight for a moment. I stood there, motionless, breathing deeply. I knew that this revelation would change everything once again. And as the clock ticked past, a certainty grew within me. The truth had not yet finished speaking. The following night was one of almost sacred silence. The kind of silence that precedes the truth. Heavy, tense, inevitable. The room still held the smell of old paper and the subtle perfume of the flowers I had picked that morning. In the center of the table, the document remained there, open, like an exposed wound that I was no longer afraid to look at. Her name shone under the yellowish light of the lamp, cold and clear as a blade. I stood there for long minutes, staring at that paper that encapsulated years of naivety. It was strange to think that the final blow came not from my children, but from a woman who learned to smile while digging the ground beneath my feet. I wondered how many times she'd rehearsed that sweetness, how many times she'd watched me with the calculated gaze of someone waiting for the exact moment to strike. But at the same time, I realized there was no more room for anger. Time had already removed the salt of hatred and left only the clean taste of clarity. I stood up, folded the paper, and tucked it inside my mother's necklace, the same one that had protected me so many times before. It was symbolic, a reminder that the stories of the women in my family were always written with scars, but also with intelligence. The next morning, the sun shone through the window with a different light. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel fear of what was to come. I only felt direction. I put on a simple dress, tied my hair back, and went to the lawyer's office. I told him everything, every detail, every name, every lie, spoken in a sweet voice. He looked at me silently for a few seconds before saying, "You know that when this comes out, nothing will be the same." I agreed, because that was exactly the intention. That afternoon, I decided that the truth would not only be revealed, it would be exposed. Cleanly, publicly, undeniably. The same stage they used to belittle me would now be the place where they would bow before their own reflection. I didn't need to shout or threaten. I simply handed the suits to those who always wanted the truth. The rest, as always, time would take care of. Days later, the newspapers began reporting the financial scandal. My daughter-in-law's company name, the same one used to move some of my money, was in all the headlines. My children, deeply involved, tried to defend themselves, but there was no longer any argument that could support what had become all too obvious. The fall was swift, almost silent. Society, which had previously seen me as a frail old woman, now called me the woman who elegantly dismantled the empire of lies. And perhaps that was the most profound turning point. I didn't win through revenge. I won through clarity. Justice didn't come with noise, but with light. Light that pierces through all that is dark and reveals what has always been there, waiting to be seen. When it was all over, I returned to the garden. The roses were in bloom, and the air smelled of damp earth. I sat on the stone bench and felt the sun warm my hands. There was weariness, yes, but there was also a kind of peace that doesn't come from victory, but from restitution. I recovered more than money. I recovered my name. As I watched the gentle movement of the leaves, I thought about how many women grow old being treated as invisible, when in fact they are the ones who silently sustain the world. How many have been called fragile, slow, incapable, and yet they continue, weaving plans with the delicacy and precision that only maturity teaches. That's why, if this story touched you in any way, If it reminded you of a strength that time has tried to erase, leave a sign. Not for me, but for all the women who continue to fight with dignity. Because every gesture of support, however small it may seem, is a way of saying, I too choose not to be silent. Today, as I walk through the house, I feel the weight of memories, but also the glow of something new. The fear is gone. The loneliness has lost its bitter tone. And what remains is a different kind of silence. A silence full of pride. I look at the hands they called old and see in them what they truly are. Hands that built, that sustained, that knew how to wait. Hands that never needed permission to start over. And that's how I end this story. Not with screams nor with tears, but with a calm smile. Because now I know. There is no age limit to reclaiming what is yours. And when respect regains its rightful place, the world learns, once again, that no woman is insignificant when she remembers who she is.